Today on Mother Mayhem. Everything bad that happened was because of me, and nothing good could happen because of me. Welcome back to Mother Mayhem, the narcissistic abuse recovery podcast for daughters. Hi, I'm your host, Heather Gray, and today y'all meet Willow. I picked this name because sometimes, like Willow, our podcast listener, you find healing in nature. Also, willow trees have a tremendous capacity to bend without breaking. And honestly, Willow, after hearing your story, I do wonder how you're still standing. I'm in awe of your ability to get yourself through your story to a place where you have built a safer life for yourself. You did this all on your own without any resources. And I hate that you were so alone in it, that you had to save your own life in thousands of ways, big and small. And if I, this show, and our community of daughters can play a role in lifting you up and holding you or in keeping you company on the path, well, that's a privilege I don't take lightly. It's the most sacred work we do here on the show. Anyone who's lived through a childhood marked by a narcissistic or emotionally limited mom will have had a life filled with trauma. Some of that trauma is going to fall into the big T category. Some of it falls into the little t category. It's always my story that anyone listening to this show has lived through both big and little t trauma. And this isn't a competition that anyone wants to win. So, that being said, Willow's story has some big T trauma, and this might not be your day for that kind of story. That doesn't mean, Willow, that you are too much or that this is too much. Only that some people listening may not have the capacity today for that kind of story, and we want that to be okay for them. Anyone listening who might find this too hard, you can back away and you can take a break. You can come back. You can decide not to come back. I want to take care of Willow here, and I can only do that by talking to her in an unfiltered way. And I can only talk to her in that unfiltered way if I trust that all of you listening are taking care of yourselves too. That you're only listening if you have the capacity for it today. Here we go, everyone. Deep breaths, everyone. Remember, you are in control. You say when, you say where, you say how much, and you get to say stop. Remember your grounding techniques. Remember you can pause. And remember to only keep listening if it's helping you to do so. Okay, Willow, mayhem has you. We already believe you, and you have a community of women who are eager to lift you. You're one of us. You belong here, and we've got you. Here's your story. I'm going to find you on the other side. Heather, when I was born, my mother suffered a maternal birth injury. Something got messed up in her lower back and pelvic floor, and she has lived with a lot of nerve pain since my birth. I've lived with a reminder of that ever since. I wonder sometimes which I knew first, my name or the fact that my mother got hurt while giving birth to me. I'm 27 years old now, and I imagine that even before I could talk or had any language skills, she probably was telling me that I was the reason she was in so much pain. This makes for my earliest memories. I remember family gatherings with extended family, and my mother would sit on the couch and she would say that she would love to help, but childbirth just rendered her unable to help. I remember her telling teachers that she couldn't help in classrooms because giving birth to me made it so she couldn't stand so long. She had me using a hand vacuum on our entire house floor when I was in kindergarten or the first grade. I remember her first trying to get me to use one of those big Hoover vacuums with a bag, but it was too heavy for me to push against the carpet. So she got me a hand vacuum and had me hand vacuum on my hands and knees with that because she simply couldn't. all my life, I was the reason she couldn't do anything. And all my life, I watched my father acquiesce to her. He would plead for me to respect her pain. One of the earliest memories of my childhood was bringing home a handmade invitation inviting my dad to the father daughter dance. And he told me we couldn't go because we'd make my mom too jealous by dancing, because that was something she could no longer do. Everything bad that happened was because of me, and nothing good could happen because of me. Wow, Willow, you're hitting my heartstrings, kid. My mom would see families out in public or on TV and lament that we were never supposed to just be a family of three. She always wanted a lot of kids, but I made it so she couldn't give my father the big family he always wanted. So I had to be the bestest girl for him so he wouldn't regret staying with us. There's a lot about my middle school and high school years that I simply don't remember. I look back on that time and wonder if I simply blacked out. But how does one who's never been into drugs or alcohol black out for such an extended period of time? By the time it was time to go to college, I knew I was going as far away as possible. Good on you, Willow. Good on you. Mother had always lamented that she could never travel as she had dreamed, and we never got to have family vacations because her back simply wouldn't allow her to travel. She said she always wanted to fill her passport, but she sacrificed all of herself and her dreams to give birth to me. I remember only looking at colleges that were a plane ride away from home. Thank goodness for that. And I majored in English and writing, knowing that I would get my master's in library science for as long as I can remember. I just wanted silence and stillness. You talk about dysregulation on the show, and I can't really remember a day when that wasn't a component of my daily living. But Heather, I'm sensitive to everything. My style of dress is downright geriatric because I can't handle tags or seams on clothing. I don't watch very much TV because I often find it all too stimulating for extended periods of time. Has anyone told you that you talk fast, Heather? A little bit, Willow, a little bit. I'm trying to slow down for you here, so let me know how I do. I listen to your podcast all the time, and admittedly, I will listen to some episodes over and over again, but I sometimes have to slow the speed because even extended periods of time listening to someone talk can be a bit much for me. Don't change a thing about what you do on my account, though. Oh, well, I'm trying to. I'm anxious and scared of a lot, but tend to avoid the things that I can't handle. I'm a librarian now, and I do have work friends, and I have some people I still talk to from school, but all of my connections are largely online. I like being connected to others, but I don't like letting them down. Saying no to social invitations all the time makes me feel bad, and once you say no often enough, people assume you don't like them and stop asking. So I have made friends online in online book clubs and librarian communities. Don't I sound like a barrel of laughs? I'm a really good time, huh? Well, you sound like someone who's gotten herself through a hell of a lot of life, kid. I've done therapy before, and I've been treated for a variety of anxiety disorders, but it never felt like anything was working. I tried meds with limited success, and ultimately I have found a way of living that brings me a lot of peace. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and it suits me and my nature. I love the outdoors, and I live an introverted life. I've been told it's isolated, but I don't actually ever feel isolated. I do find, however, that I get these daydreams of things I want to do, and I can tell the way I am prevents me from doing them. I would love to do some mission or volunteer work that involves bringing books to underserved kids. I do wish I had more people to talk about ideas with. I wonder too what it would be like not to be me, to be someone who could go into all of these coffee shops that are around here and just talk to others. You would think that working with other librarians that we talk about books all the time, but not so much. I mostly listen in to stories of their kids and grandkids and help them with the tech that comes with our jobs because they aren't used to it. I also seem to carry a bit of physical pain of my own. I've never given it much thought because I've always assumed it was me being a hypochondriac after a lifetime of hearing about my mom's pain. In any case, I hope it's okay if I don't end with any real question. I guess I wanted you to hear my story and was curious as to what you might think. Please do feel free to offer me any advice or direction. I'm just not sure I know the right questions to ask. Thanks. Okay, everyone. Let's just take a second here and sit together for a hot minute. That was a big, hard story we all just sat with. So we can breathe through it. You all probably felt this story in some kind of way, and I know I did, and that isn't even the first time I read it. So we're going to honor and respect that. We can send warm thoughts to Willow, and we can wish her strength and hope that she feels our company on the path. Too, also want to let all of you know that after drafting my response to Willow, I did reach out to her. I gave her a heads up about what I was thinking because my thoughts and my ideas on this were too big and too important to just have her listen to by herself through the podcast. I didn't want her to feel sucker punched. I wanted her to feel in control of the entire process, from soup to nuts. And I assured her that I wouldn't publish anything without her permission. So, as you imagine this conversation I'm having with Willow, know that I already know she's okay. She knows what I'm going to say. We decided together that we wouldn't just offer you all a summary of her chat. She wanted something to hold on to, something that got to be hers. I had told her about Courtney's episode, which at the time hadn't aired yet, and how Courtney just wanted me to talk to her. And Willow agreed that she wanted that for herself too, but wanted the protection of the pseudonym. I hope, Willow, that you like what I picked, and I hope you can feel this community holding you right now. Okay, now that that's all been said, can we please, for the love of God, just say, God damn it, mother fucks? Can we just get that out of the way, please? Sorry, Willow. Hopefully you don't find that too overstimulating. We hate, hate, hate that this happened to you. None of this was fair. None of this was your fault. And you did not deserve anything that has been handed to you in this life. And holy hell, Willow, look at what you did for yourself. Look at what you did against all impossible odds. You took a childhood that was completely marred by abuse, neglect, and trauma, and with stunning clarity as to who you are and what you needed, you built yourself a life. What a thing you have done for yourself. What a thing. And I know I hear really clearly from you too that as much as this life brings you peace and order and safety and control, I know it also hinders you, and that makes sense to me, and that's okay. I hear how you see that this is true for yourself, and I honor with you that you want more for yourself too. I want you to know that I believe a fuller life truly is possible for you. And I am so freaking glad you found this show, that you identify with it, and that it has become a part of your healing. And if we were sitting in person together right now and we were in the same room, I would be encouraging you to sit in such a way that you can feel both of your feet on the floor. I would encourage you to get your arms and your hands comfortable. And I would encourage you to either close your eyes or just divert your gaze if closing your eyes doesn't quite feel safe. And I would encourage you to take some deep, deep breaths with me. So please take a deep breath with me now and keep focusing on your breath for a bit as I talk. Now, you've done so much right for yourself, Willow, and you have done it all despite the odds. The childhood you had, the messaging you received, the things said to you, the things withheld from you, well, they're simply horrific. Nothing that happened during your birth was your fault, and you did not deserve a childhood marred by blame and accountability. You didn't deserve any of this. And if I was still doing theater like I used to do back in the day, I might be tempted right now to recreate that scene in Good Will Hunting between Robin Williams and Matt Damon, where Robin Williams repeats over and over that what happened to Will wasn't his fault. Because you really need to know and own that for yourself, Willow. But I know that that must feel like an impossible ask because it has been programmed into you as the facts of your birth, just like your birthday, your eye color, or how much you weighed. Me telling you that it wasn't your fault will sound nice, but I have a feeling it's not going to feel true. I want to explain to you why it's so hard for you to believe. And it's tied to what you said about wondering how young you were when you first started being fed this family line about your mom's pain. I actually think you're onto something here, Willow. I think you were fed this story from the day you were born, from before you had words. And I think you were treated as the cause for your mother's pain since then, too. Honestly, Willow, the layers of trauma that this likely has caused for you is pretty significant. I appreciate that you had the help of professionals and that you see that anxiety as a part of your story, but I think your professionals likely failed to ask you the right questions. And because your birth story was presented to you as fact, I wonder if it ever occurred to you to mention your birth story to professionals. I can almost see how it might not occur to you to mention. And I do like to think that professionals ask the right questions, but I know they don't always. I think something important got missed, Willow. You've heard me talk on the show about PTSD, and you've likely heard me mention CPTSD, say that 5 times fast, or chronic PTSD on the show. I'm going to need you to take another deep breath with me, Willow, because I think it's possible that you might be struggling with what us psychobabble people call pre-verbal PTSD. Now, that is a big, hairy, scary term, and I want you to be able to stay in this conversation with me. So keep taking those deep breaths. We're going to take this one thing at a time, and then after this conversation, I'm going to strongly urge you to either return to one of your previous providers or find a new provider to be evaluated for this. If this is in fact what we're dealing with, it would make a lot of sense to me why you haven't had good luck with anxiety treatment in the past, and why treatment for pre-verbal PTSD could offer you more relief. And I also want to be clear, Willow, it is my strong, strong belief that you find a provider in your area that's trauma experienced who can help you with this. I know for a lot of you listening in that this show is literally the only therapy any of you do. I know for some of you it's because therapy is cost prohibitive. Others feel that there are other providers and they haven't gotten it, or that other providers can't get it. And I understand that, but I worry that by not having anything other than this podcast, that some of you stay in a place of suffering for longer than you need to. And I would never want that for any of you. You all might be a little hard pressed to find a therapist who specifically treats daughters of emotionally limited mothers. There are incredibly skilled trauma therapists doing good work, and anyone experienced in trauma will be able to help you with all that you're holding. After we're done talking, Willow, I do hope you'll meet with someone licensed in your area to help you navigate the things that I can't get to given the limitations of the podcast. First, I want to offer an explanation of pre-verbal PTSD because it certainly doesn't get the airtime or exposure of the other forms of trauma. Pre-verbal PTSD refers to post-traumatic stress disorder that stems from trauma experienced before an individual has developed that capacity for words and language. For you, Willow, your trauma began at the date of your birth with your mom's injury. You might not be used to thinking that way, and you might not be used to thinking about this as trauma. You might have grown up thinking that your parents talked about your mother's injury as plain fact, But it was, in fact, abuse, and it was most definitely trauma and traumatic to spend 27 years of your life being told that you were the root cause of your mother's pain. If this is all you've known, it will be hard for you to believe this about yourself just because I told you so. But maybe you can consider putting me in your place. If your story was my story and I was telling you how I grew up being blamed for my mother's pain, would you be able to consider that to be traumatic for me? I hope so, because what you went through, Willow, was unconscionable, utterly unconscionable. Even though you were too young to comprehend the situation or articulate your feelings, your brain and your body were still absorbing these experiences and these horrific messages. You see, babies, well, they're incredibly attuned to the emotions and pain of their caregivers. And babies are surprisingly capable of internalizing those feelings in really profound ways. These feelings, well, without words, they become absorbed into your body. I think this is likely what happened for you, Willow, as well as for countless women listening. After all, narcissists don't press the pause button on their narcissism until their children reach some unidentified age where they're supposedly capable of receiving such abusive and neglectful messages. There is no such age. Of course, we know this. That's why this messaging is so cruel at any age. And when we're looking at and considering this, we also have to look at not just what was said, but how you might have been neglected in correlation to the things being said to you. I hold real fear for you, Willow, of how a mother talks to her kid in that way, treats that little girl when she was a baby. I fear that you felt neglect and blame in your body with so many unmet physical and emotional needs. You deserved so much better. You deserved so much better, Willow. There seem to be several places in your experience that correlate with my thinking on this. Here's how preverbal PTSD can show up. Heightened sensitivity was a key indicator for me on this one. It makes so much sense to me because babies can feel so much before they can express so much. So people who struggle with preverbal PTSD often do acknowledge the same increased sensitivity that you spoke of in your letter. People who struggle with this do often find themselves to be sensitive to sounds, touch, or social situations. And as you pointed out, chronic dysregulation is also fairly common. It makes sense to me that feelings of anxiety and dysregulation have become a constant presence in your life. Without a way for your little defenseless body to process all that you were being force fed, your nervous system developed this patterned way of responding to stress. Also, Willow, I don't for a second consider you to be a hypochondriac. Not for one moment. I probably haven't talked about this on the show as much as I should have, but trauma stored in the body can lead to physical pain, similar to what you've described here. This might include chronic pain and other somatic symptoms that can sometimes otherwise feel inexplicable. It seems as though you work really hard to keep yourself afloat and steady. And I wonder if that might be because otherwise you find regulating your emotions to be a bit of a challenge for you. It would make sense to me how anything could potentially be a shock to your system. It's simply not normal to be told that the reason for everything wrong in your family's life is because you were born. That is a god awful, horrific message to repeatedly hear. And of course, your brain has put in defenses to protect you from some of that. And one of those defenses would likely be freeze. We talk about fight, flight, fawn, freeze, But we haven't actually talked about freeze too much. It hasn't gotten the same amount of airtime on the show as some of the others, but I suspect you survived your childhood by living largely in the freeze state. So here's the deal with freeze. When faced with a threat that feels, unmanageable, our nervous system may respond by immobilizing us. This can look or even feel like a temporary state of paralysis or complete withdrawal from the situation. It's as if your body goes into some sort of shutdown mode, and you might be or feel physically and emotionally numb. People in freeze do tend to avoid, and they might even struggle with memory. Now, Willow, I want to be crystal clear here. If you indeed went into that freeze state and your trauma brain did put you there, I want you to know that I think and believe that this is an incredibly, incredibly good thing. I am grateful, actually, that you went into freeze. Really grateful because there is absolutely, positively no fucking way I would wish you to ever actually feel all of the repercussions of your family's abusive messaging. If you were numb for a lot of it, that's actually really good. It doesn't mean that you don't care or that you weren't affected. It means that you care so much that your brain has to protect you because you caring like that would have only made you vulnerable to more harm. We are so grateful you froze. And we need to be super, super careful bringing you back to regulation. We have to go slow and we have to handle with care so as to respect how dysregulating you might find it to stop freezing. We don't want all of that trauma that your brain has protected you from all along to just come flooding back all at once. We're seeking to control it in specific, deliberate, and measured ways. This is why I'm urging you to find a therapist who can help you slowly unpack all that you've endured, because the way you were treated was awful, but also it was all you ever knew. So it was normal for you. And it won't do you any good if I bop you over the head with all the things that were awful about the way you were raised, if I don't also offer you some way to contain all of it. And honestly, I am treading pretty carefully here. And I'm hoping that I'm going slow enough for you so that I can make sense to you without overwhelming you. Sometimes willow trees can be confused with dissociating. And my guess is that to get you through your childhood in the way that you have, you probably might have also dissociated a time or two as well. That's another scary psychobabble term. So let me take the scary out of it as much as I can, because it is very likely another way that your brain protected you from things that were too painful for you to take in while you were actually living your childhood. So, dissociation is this thing that can happen to you in the moment that you're experiencing trauma, where your brain sort of protects you from yourself. Many of you listeners listening in on our chat right now may have experienced this a time or two with yourselves. You disconnect from yourself, and I have been told that it can feel like you're observing your life and your circumstances from outside your body. It might feel like you're checked out or like you're numbed, and this usually tends to happen in super emotionally charged moments, like all of the times you were blamed for things wrong in your family. And I'm sure you saw those messages coming from a mile away after a while, and so likely, probably in some kind of prevent defense, you would shut down, numb out, or tune out to get through. And honestly, Willow, this probably sounds like a lot, but your brain was your very, very best friend in these instances, and it really had your back. We are so very grateful to your brain and its amazing capabilities to protect you as much as it could from that debilitating messaging you received your entire life. The problem, I think, if I'm right on this, is that dissociation is really only supposed to be temporary in these really high moments of stress. Your life, the way it went down, likely forced you to live there for longer than it was helpful. And as a result, it's harder for you to connect to and process your trauma. That's why we need to go super slow here and hopefully get a trained professional to join you on this. Pre-verbal PTSD, like I talked about earlier, does sometimes have this physical pain aspect to it. It can include body pain and aches, but also panic attacks. Some people who live with this experience disruption in their digestion or in their sleep. That chronic anxiety and chronic dysregulation throws your body systems off because, of course, it would. And as you've experienced here, Willow, connecting with and trusting others in a healthy way can be really, really hard. Your first memories were the opposite of trust and safety. You were being betrayed by the people closest to you every single day. So I don't really blame you for having such little interest in people. I wouldn't either. Honestly, I imagine that's true. Intimacy and getting closer to others likely feels like a foreign language for you. And it's, of course, you're going to have the same struggles that other daughters have with conflict avoidance or people pleasing and perfectionism. It makes for a really hard trifecta of impossibly hard, for a better word. I hated having to tell you all of this because I know the size of the pile that I just put in front of you, and it is daunting. I know how intimidating it is, and I'm sensitive to it. I believe, though, that information really is power. It gives you control over what happens next. And here's the next thing I want you to hear from me. I have so much hope for you, Willow, so much. And let me tell you why. Somehow, amidst all of what you've lived with, you found this podcast and you listened to it. And by listening to it, you felt enough of a relationship with me to reach out. What that tells me is that your brain is ready, Willow. Your brain is ready to do some of this work, to unpack some of this stuff. And you know what that tells me, Willow? We have Wise Mind on the scene. Your brain doesn't stop doing its fight, flight, fawn, freeze thing until it feels safe. So, Willow, you have saved your own life, sister. You have saved your own life. You have built yourself a life where your brain feels safe enough to let down some of your defenses. And that is positively incredible given all that you've lived through. And yes, you do have work to do on calming your body and learning to attach to the world in a way that feels healthy and safe for you. But you alone have built the foundation in your life to do that work. And that just impresses the hell out of me. And here's what I also want you to know. And I want you to remember this, and please do consider it. I think one of the reasons you might not have found relief with the anxiety treatment in the past is not just because the actual diagnosis might have been missed or confused, but because we're talking about trauma that existed before you had words for it. So it's in your body. We need it released, but it wasn't processed originally as words. It was processed as feelings or as energy. So once you get a treatment provider to work with you on this, I'm going to recommend here that you consider not just focusing on talk therapy. I think what you're experiencing would likely very much benefit from treatment that's more grounded in your body than in your words, in your conversation and processing. Now, those of you who follow me on Instagram know I have been talking more and more about polyvagal work, somatic work, and nervous system regulation. You haven't heard me talk too much about this on the show because honestly, I am still working to get better trained at it, and it is simply not part of my toolkit right now, but I really think it has to be. So I have been working to get better informed. But Willow and others of you looking for some kind of treatment, it would be worth Googling somatic trauma work in your area or perhaps Googling body centered therapy for trauma. I've been sending everyone to Sarah Baldwin Coaching. I discovered her work through a client who purchased Sarah's program, and I helped my client through some of it. It's really good content, better than I would offer, and I'm going to link to her Instagram and to her website for more information. And honestly, y'all, when this work is this deep, I really do think polyvagal work is the best answer. I think you need the information from me, but I think you'll find better tools for relief with people who use a different approach other than words. Now, this next part, Willow, I initially recorded it, then I took it out, but since we talked and I was able to give you a heads up, I'm putting it back in. I wasn't sure how I felt about including this conversation, but it's connected to something you shared in your letter. I worry a little bit here that my response might trigger or open something your brain hasn't yet connected to. But also, you shared it with me, and I worry that if I skipped it, you would think that I didn't think it was an important part of your story. A few weeks ago, you heard me talk to Candace. She found herself in an epic smear campaign and was ruminating about everything that went down. And in my chat with her, I told her that part of her trauma was how everyone she knew went along with and catered her mom's fucked up version of events. Candace, your dad is so guilty of that. And everyone who was present when your mom spewed her vitriol and didn't defend you is guilty of that. Those people, by not defending you, not correcting her, well, they're why you're having such a hard time right now. Because your body likely interpreted that as them believing and agreeing with your mom. And that might be why some of this has been hard for you to connect with others. And what's crazy in this story is that the solution for this chronic pain was just that everyone was satisfied to blame you, not to try to resolve the pain, not to try to find solutions for her. It makes me wonder, honestly, how much pain she actually had and for how long she has actually had it. You and Candace are in the same boat as so many daughters. Everyone around you just drank the fucking Kool-Aid. And God, that pisses me off. Your brain here, though, Willow, is your superhero. It really had you. It really had you. And you have done so much with such few tools and resources. You, my friend, are remarkable. Truly. And I meant what I said. There is so much hope in your story. I do believe we can get you feeling safer in your body and get you feeling more comfortable outside of your comfort zone. And I hate that you have lived with this story for 27 years of your life. And that is way too long to be hearing that kind of bullshit and to be fed that god awful story. But I am grateful that you found yourself in this conversation at 27 years old, not at 47 or not at 67. We have women listening to this show that are having this conversation with themselves for the first time who are over the age of 50. In fact, nearly 40% of my listening audience is over the age of 45. So we have time on our side for you. And what I like about body work in this moment, and this goes along with polyvagal work and somatic work, is it takes less time than talk therapy. So please, any of you listening who have not found success with talk therapy, please do consider finding resources for this in your area. Now, I imagine, Willow, that being a librarian, you're going to be fine with research on your side. So go ahead and do yourself a favor. Look into the work of Dr. Peter Levine. You also, while you're there, can look up Dr. Stephen Porges. I think it's spelled Porges. I think that's how you say it. I will try to include some of the resources for them in the show notes. And I also know you guys and everybody listening, I know that one of the books that always comes up and enters the chat at this point is The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Honestly, I got to tell y'all, I think that's a much better text for therapists than it is for clients. I think it can be hard to get through as a client. We just need you, Willow, to put you in a better and more efficient direction for healing. It started in your body, and I believe we can help your body heal. Now, admittedly, the discussion on polyvagal interventions or body informed trauma interventions is pretty new when we're talking about trauma recovery. Another approach that clients of mine have had really good success with is called EMDR therapy. And Willow, I think you might be a good candidate for this as well. Now, EMDR therapy is a specialized type of therapy, and it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Good thing I don't have to say that one 5 times fast. It sounds a little bit complicated, but at its core, it's about helping your brain process traumatic memories that have been stuck. And then as a result, they haven't fully healed. The way it works is that a trained EMDR therapist, and you would have to make sure that the therapist that you look for is in fact trained and certified in this. But an EMDR therapist is going to guide you with recalling these painful memories. Instead, though, of just talking about them, they're going to use specific eye movements or other forms of what's called rhythmic bilateral stimulation. And that might be tapping or sound while you are thinking of those memories. This movement is going to help your brain to reprocess the memories in a way that can reduce that emotional charge they carry. And I know it sounds totally crazy pants. If you've never heard of it and you've never heard this described, it just sounds nuts. But what's really great about EMDR is that you don't have to relive every single detail of your trauma. You just focus on what feels manageable. Over time and with repetition, it allows your brain to start to resolve those stuck memories. They make them less distracting. It helps them become something that happened in the past rather than something you're still emotionally reliving every day in your present. A lot of my clients find that it helps them feel relief relatively quickly, even for trauma that happened a while ago in your childhood. I think this might be a really helpful tool for you, Willow, especially for pain that you've been carrying and you haven't fully processed. It would for sure be worth checking in with any new provider that you find to see if they're EMDR trained and certified or if they might recommend EMDR for you. And that goes true for all of you daughters listening. If you have stuck trauma that hasn't been resolved with talk therapy, I want to encourage you all to look into the polyvagal work, the nervous system regulation work, and then also do look into EMDR because just like Willow, you might find that you're a good fit for that as well. Willow, we see you. We believe you. We're rooting for you. Welcome to Mayhem. It is for sure a club no one asked to be a member of, but you are in a community of women around the world who are in this conversation with you. And I, for sure, most definitely, am in it with you too. Bye for now. I do hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you have a question you'd like me to consider for the show, please do email me over at heather@daughtersnpd.com. You are always welcome to share your story or questions by recording yourself using the voice app on your phone. For best recording quality, please do record directly into your phone without using headphones or Bluetooth speakers. We're building an incredible community as well over on Instagram, and I'd love to see you over there too. You can find us at Daughters NPD. Lastly, if you love what you've been hearing here on Mayhem and have found the show helpful in your own trauma recovery, please do consider becoming a Mother Mayhem sponsor by purchasing simple scripts for saying hard things. It's a resource I created that provides the right words for the hard conversations, and it covers life, love, and work. You'll find a link for that in the show notes. If you know another woman who needs this conversation in her life, please do share the show with her. Your reviews and social shares help spread the word, and I hope you'll consider doing so. Special thanks to Heather Clark for editing the show. She's in my head and knows what I meant to say when the words come out backwards. Thanks so much for your time today. As always, I'm in it with you. Bye for now.